Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it is great. It is the week of the 4th of July, which means that about 75% of Americans are not working and about 20% of the others are pretending to work. Tony, proud to be here in the 5% with you actually working this week. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, fellow hero. Thank you. But we are here, and although, let's be honest, we're not doing too much work. These are listener questions. So we will answer the questions, but we couldn't put up so much effort to ask the questions or come up with the questions. But, this show is generally for the people as well. And so let's, Tom, no more hemming and hawing. Let's just give the people what they want. Let's get to the questions.
All right. Well, the first one of those questions is from @SPathfinder1. How important is it to get a commit from Luke Fahey? Luke Fahey, of course, is the 2026 quarterback that is probably one of the more potentially imminent commitments to the 2026 class if he doesn't in fact choose to go to Ohio State.
Yeah, he's scheduled to announce on July 3rd. So if it's not Luke Fahey in 2026, you're probably not getting a quarterback in 2026 unless you can convince Brady Edmonds to move from 27 to 26 or convince, I don't know, Favoraki to play quarterback instead of running back. And I don't think either, I don't think the latter one's definitely not happening. But in terms of how big is it, like it's very important. It's very big for Ohio State to get this commitment. And because if you don't, there's nothing really left out there, or you're going to just, let's go branch further down the list to somebody that we didn't believe should play here, could play here. And now you're grabbing more of a project, which again, we've talked in the past. I don't think that's a terrible idea in the age of the portal to go ahead and grab somebody that might be a little more patient, but still getting somebody to be patient. I mean, anymore is a tough ask at quarterback. I think you've gotten about all of the patience you can out of Lincoln Keenholz, and they did the same thing with Devin Brown. So they've been able to do that. Certainly Kyle McCord is staying for as long as he did, even though, he did get to start. But I think in terms of importance, we'll ask her, well, this will be a question on the next listener question show, but it's big because they want to continue to keep that room stocked, and because you never know when you're going to lose somebody, but also it's a pretty darn good player. And that's another thing, plays in a big time school, has big time offers. So he's a guy that they believe can play at Ohio State. So yeah, it is very, very big to get that, because if you don't, then you're continuing to chase. And whether that's a second quarterback in 2027 or two quarterbacks in 27 and two in 28, like this is the stuff you're talking about if you miss out on 26.
Yeah, it feels like the math has sort of changed on quarterbacks in recruiting, because it always used to be you want to get one guy a year because then you'll have, your first year, you're going to sit, and that's okay. In your second year, you're maybe backing up and you're doing a little bit more. And then by your third year, you're ready to maybe be a starter. Everything has gotten sped up so much that you take two quarterbacks like they did last year, and one of them is already gone. Aaron Noland is gone from the 2025 Ohio State quarterback class. You just kind of have to take minimally one per year. And I think, to your point, you're probably going to need to start taking two at least maybe every other year if you can find guys who are willing to do that. That's certainly a challenge, because just like you don't want to, you want to get guys who you think can play there. Just having a warm body there to, hold a chair down on the ground in the quarterback meeting room doesn't really do you a whole heck of a lot of good. You've got to have guys who you think can potentially play. Being patient these days is, well, I might not play until my second year. That sort of counts as patience and sort of long-term thinking right now. And I'm not trying to make this a rabble kids today kind of thing. This is just, that's the reality of the quarterback position. Is it's a spot where only one guy can play. And if you sit and you wait for 3 years and you only have 1 year of eligibility left, then your options are a little bit more limited. And when you go to a place, you might not, you might only have a limited number of schools that are interested if you're only going to be a 1 year player. And you also only have 1 year to sort of get adjusted to stuff. Think about how different Kyle McCord's, time at Syracuse would have been. He had a great season last year, but because he played in 5 games in his first year at Ohio State, he is out of eligibility. So he was not going to be able to go back to Syracuse. So that really sort of changes your trajectory as a quarterback. And with the kind of money that's getting thrown around with quarterbacks right now, there's no, if you're going to be the fourth guy in the depth chart at Ohio State in year 3 or 2 or whatever, you may decide, someone's going to be willing to give me $500,000 to go be the starter at lower level Power 5 school or high G5 school or whatever. Quarterback is a position where money gets thrown around a lot. And so just, I think the Lincoln Keenholzes and Devin Browns of the world deserve a little bit of credit because you are being patient and you are sticking around and, sort of fighting it out and trying to win the quarterback job. And that's, that's not a bad thing. That's probably somewhat a noble thing, but either way, not everyone's going to choose to do that. There are going to be guys who leave after a year. There's going to be guys who leave after 2 years, and you don't want to be in the spot that they were in this spring where they had 3 scholarship quarterbacks, because if someone leaves after the spring, then you're really in trouble. And so they didn't, and then they were able to add Eli Brickhandler, the transfer from Houston Christian. So you now have 4 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster, but you're still a little bit thin, and you kind of need to take that extra guy here and there. You're going to have to take it 2 guys at some point. You sure as heck need to get a guy this year, and Luke Fahey feels like he's probably the most likely and highest ceiling of the possible remaining candidates there.
Well, and one of the other problems when we talk about money is a lot of times players are being told that you're losing money by staying where you are and not transferring. And so it's not just the money that you're making at one place, it's the money that you could be making somewhere else. And people are already trying to spend that. It's like you're losing it. And we could have so much more money if we would just leave. And you got all of these different people pulling, and then not just other people, but certainly players want to make as much as they can as well. And so to stick around it takes a lot to get players to stick around and just continue to compete, and especially at quarterback, which is completely different than any other position, I think, anywhere in sports in that regard.
Yeah. Not only maybe the most important position in all of team sports, but also one where there's only one of them. There's not, you can't rotate. You're not rotating 5 wide receivers. It's not in the same way you can rotate 5 wide receivers. You got one quarterback, and maybe you use 2, maybe you use them situationally, but it is not easy to do. So very important, and also very narrow path to the field equals potentially a lot of drama there for sure. Next one from @Tony_Lisa13. With the college football playoff format under constant expansion consideration, at what point do conference championship games go away? Out of network greed, they do not appear to offer a great benefit. Outside of network greed, they do not appear to offer a great benefit to the participants. And this is one where if the conference championship games stay, if the format stays the way it is sort of projected, which is either you stay the current format or it goes to 14 or 16 teams, and it's the 5-11 format where it's just the conference champion that gets in automatically, the 5 conference champions, and then it's just at large after that, you're probably going to see those games continue sort of for the foreseeable future. If they go to the 4-4-2-2 1-3 format that they had talked about, or some variation of that where you have multiple guaranteed bids for conferences, that's when you get into the conversation about, hey, maybe a 3 versus 6 and a 4 versus 5 kind of game is more intriguing, because the 1 versus 2 is you're going to get in no matter what, so it doesn't matter, who really cares. That's probably where those conference championship games might go away, but it would go away except potentially be replaced by more college football playoff play-in games, which are still essentially conference playoff, conference championship games, except the conference championship's not on the line. It's just the college football playoff spot is on the line.
Yeah, and when people say, well, how would you determine the conference champion? Well, the same way they did it for 100 years before, and that's just regular season standings, boom, you're the champ. And Jim Tressel has a bunch of Big Ten championships that way, and so people were perfectly fine with it. I that is one of the questions I hope I can ask Tony Petitti when we talk to we don't get to talk to him necessarily. He's there for what, maybe 30 minutes on TV, and just a lot of times they also don't want to, I don't want to talk about hypotheticals. It's like, well, in this age of college football, don't you have to, like, aren't you only operating in hypotheticals? Like, how do you, like, well, I don't want to discuss what possibly could happen, it's like, then you're in the wrong business, pal. Like, I don't know. I hate to break it to you, but you need to go back to Major League Baseball or TV or whatever, because I got some bad news for you. It's all hypothetical at this point. And so hypothetically, yeah, if this goes 4-4, 2-2-1, or another plan that I've seen thrown around a little bit is 4-4, 2.5, 2.5, which is the third place team in the Big 12 faces the third place team in the ACC for a bid. I think that's interesting. And a lot of this stuff for me is just, it sounds interesting. It sounds new. I like it, especially over 5+11, which I'm afraid of, and I know others aren't. But if they do go to the 4-4 in the automatic qualifiers, then what is the point of the conference championship game? And is it as much punishment as anything? Because I keep going back to Kirby Smart last year, not necessarily wanting to play in the SEC championship game, seeing it as kind of a punishment. And it's absolutely a punishment. The reward would be not having to play in a game for a week and just basking and letting everybody else beat each other up while you got some rest. So last year was a 1 year sample size that's too small to say like everybody was like, nobody benefited from winning the championship, your conference championship, and everybody benefited from losing the conference championship game. I mean, that's how it was last year. And I suspect unless things change, that's going to be how it is again this year, because they were intent on not punishing anybody that made it in the conference championship game. So I don't know. Maybe the directives will change this year in certain circumstances, but I think if I had my way, then yeah, you get rid of the conference championship games and then you play two other games that matter more. Now, I am also against one of the proposals at the SEC of 1 versus 8 and 2 versus 7. That's too much. Like that's too much. I like a lot. That's too much. Just reward the top 2 teams and then let everybody else battle. And I think that's a happy medium for everybody that is accepting of the automatic qualifiers. But Tom, I know there are some that don't love the automatic qualifiers. I just think it's almost like you're probably going to have 4 anyway. And so are you giving up that much by accepting that you have to have 4 automatic qualifiers, Tom, for your side of things? Like, it's probably going to be around there. So is it just like, what irks you most about that? Is it just the cowardice of the conferences?
Yeah, I mean, this is a thing. On a fundamental level, just looking at it, just purely objectively, the idea of you get 4 automatic bids just because, most year you would have gotten 4 teams in. That feels like that's great. Like you don't, why don't you go ahead and earn it rather than just sort of get it handed to you. And that to me feels like deeply anti-competitive, and it's not even that everyone's getting the same. It's just that, some animals are more equal than the others. And look, our 2 conferences are just a little more special than yours. So we'll all divide this up equally, except for, 1 for you, 2 for me, 1 for you, 2 for me. And so that just feels a little bit antithetical to the whole notion of competition. But that being said, I also do think that having the 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, or whatever the thing may be, it might be 2 versus 3 in the ACC and in the Big 12, or it's number 3 in one conference and number 3 in the other conference, whatever it is. It just, that feels like that solves the problem of conference championship weekend, because there is a problem right now with conference championship weekend, which is, it's great that you win the Big Ten championship or the SEC championship or whatever it is. That's wonderful. But you can give that out based on the regular season. And there was times relatively recently when there were co-champions of the Big Ten and it was fine. And you got a trophy and you had earned it through the regular season. And if you have tiebreakers, great. If you can't reach the tiebreakers, that's fine too. You can just have co-champions, and that is not the end of the world, because that's no longer it's not just one team from this conference is going to get in. If you're a Big Ten co-champion, you're almost certainly getting in the college football playoff either way. So that to me solves the issue of conference championship games last year being largely irrelevant. It was kind of Penn State and Oregon are both going to make the college football playoff. how much does it really matter who wins this game? I mean, it matters, but it doesn't really matter in terms of the national championship. It's not a national championship elimination thing like it kind of used to be. So I think that it helps make that game more relevant. But you got to remember, I mean, Kirby Smart, you mentioned not, viewing playing in that SEC championship game as kind of a punishment. It wasn't just that they had to play an extra game. They lost their quarterback in that game. That was, Carson Beck got hurt. And, I'm sure everyone has thoughts on exactly how different Georgia would have looked with Carson Beck as quarterback versus Gunnar Stockton. But it certainly didn't help that they lost their starting quarterback. So that's, you're putting your players at risk. You're putting your, bigger picture stuff at risk. And then, the benefit is kind of like, yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to win the SEC championship, but that's not the ultimate goal. So if you're going to win the SEC championship but hurt your national championship chances quite a bit, that's not a trade-off coaches aren't going to be willing to make. So I do think if there are real stakes to those games become important and really exciting again. And under the current system, they're really kind of largely irrelevant. And that, so what are we doing here other than TV? And the answer is not much. So
yeah. I mean, the Big Ten championship game was fun. It was a good game. It was a good watch. It was high scoring. There's a lot of talent.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon wins it, and they're an underdog in their first game. Penn State loses it, and they have the easiest road to the Final Four. So again, like where's the benefit of that? And of course, that changes with the seeding change, and so we'll have a second year to see how things go in that regard. But for the SEC, like you said, you lose your starting quarterback. And knowing that the SEC coaches want the 5+11 and they don't want a ninth conference game, I wonder what would they vote to just, we don't need a SEC championship game. Like in terms of if it was a 4-4-2-2-1, there's no way they want to have to play in an SEC championship game and then go play it in the playoffs. They will always take the path of least resistance. And that's at least one that I can agree with them on. That might be the only one that I can agree with the SEC coaches on if they were to have that opinion, which would be the same as mine, which is why I would agree with them.
Yeah, and that decision on what the future playoff format is going to look like, I believe the deadline is December 1st, but let me let you in on a little secret. If they don't have a decision by December 1st, the deadline will just get pushed back a little bit, and that will be okay. That'll be how it sort of works itself out. But that's sort of the timeline we're talking about. But yeah, it does feel like the Big Ten was much more on the 4-4-2-2-1-3 sort of model. And the SEC seemed like they were, and then they weren't. And so everything's sort of getting discussed at this point, and we'll see, what the tone of those discussions are. It might be some volume involved in the tone of some of those discussions, but they'll have to sort that out. And it'll be interesting to see how this season plays out. Because everyone's going to take whatever happens this season and model it forward and go, well, under this format, we would have gotten X number of teams in the playoff this year. And under Y format, we would have gotten this number of teams in the playoff next year. And, as ridiculous as it is to say that might sway some people's opinions that, well, this would have worked out better for us, under one of these formats or another. I bet it probably does to a certain degree. So we'll see how that all plays out this year. And then we'll maybe have an answer December 1st. And if not, we'll have an answer sometime after that. Here's one that you'll get an answer on right now from @Vango_0. Tony, who is the worst college football, and we're going to do some scare quotes here, analyst on TV this century? His suggestions, Trev Alberts, Mark May, Peter Burns, but he does throw in et cetera, Tony, and et cetera always does some heavy lifting on questions like this.
Well, I'll just address Peter Burns. I don't know if I've ever seen him say anything. I've never watched him in anything. He's just often tweeted, and his tweets make it into our sphere. And yeah, they are what they are. He is the SEC honk that he certainly plays the part correct. And so, but in terms of like, I don't know what his other. I don't know enough about him. I don't see him enough to have a strong opinion in terms of the worst. I think this is a little old school as far back in this century, if that still counts as old school. Like Dan Fouts was not very good in the Ohio State Miami game. That was a bad one, where his Kellen Winslow fandom kind of took over in that one. And but I don't know what ESPN gets out of Desmond Howard. I think that's one where he, in terms of analysis, he's on the show. I get that, and I can't say anything too bad about him, or else people will from that show or Kirk Herbstreit might come after you and demand satisfaction. But I think they could do better, certainly. And one of my problems with ESPN college football, their production over the years, is that I wish they would have taken the sport as seriously as they did the NFL for a while. Like when they had Mark May and Trev Alberts together, and like you had like Lou Holtz doing shtick with Mark May. I think that may have been the worst of it. Lou Holtz and Mark May, when those two were together, and it's just like you clearly consider college football a joke, and they presented it as such. And Reese Davis finally got away from that when it was able to do game day. But Mark May, that's if we're talking Mount Rushmore's time, and I know you love Mount Rushmore's, he's going to be up there. And I think he's probably, if we were doing this Family Feud style, that's going to be the number one answer on the board, I believe.
Yeah, you say his name and everyone starts clapping and goes, yeah, good answer. Good answer. Yeah. And then someone says something that no one has ever said before. Show me Mark May. And I think the interesting piece of this is the three names that were thrown out there. They're all kind of doing the same thing. It's all kind of the same job. It's all, we're going to say stuff and it's going to, oh boy, if you like the team I'm making fun of, you're going to hate me and you're going to keep watching to find out what I'm going to say about your team next. And if you hate, if you love the team I'm talking about, boy, you're going to keep watching to find out what I say next. It's the old Howard Cosell thing. Why, the audience survey they did on Monday Night Football. Why the people who love him, or was it Howard Stern? Might have been Howard Stern too. Yeah, Howard Stern. But I think it was also Howard Cosell was like the most loved and most hated person in sports media. Howard Stern. Why do you keep, people who love him? Why do they keep listening? Can't wait to hear what he says next. People who hate him. Why do they keep listening? I can't wait to hear what he says next. This is the gimmick. Like this is the bit that all the people on this list are doing. Trev Alberts, Mark May. The bit was they're going to pick against Ohio State every time, and oh boy, they're wrong again. But oh boy, guess what? They're going to pick against them next week, and that's Desmond Howard's bit right now, and that's pretty much all he contributes. He's going to pick Michigan every week, and he's pick against Ohio State every week, and oh boy, I can't wait to see who he picks next week. And there's it's interesting that Gary Danielson's name is not on this list because there's not very many years ago Gary Danielson's name would have been on this list. Because Gary Danielson was the SEC slappy, and then CBS got the Big Ten contract, and all of a sudden Gary Danielson no longer thinks the SEC is the greatest conference in the history of the world. And boy, isn't that interesting that how his opinion changed right at that same time. And Joel Klatt's name is not on this list because Joel Klatt says nice things about Ohio State and the Big Ten. Why is Joel Klatt's name not on this list? Well, I'm sure during, the Gator Weekly podcast or whatever, Joel Klatt's name would be on this list because Joel Klatt's saying mean things about the SEC. So it's all kind of, everyone's doing the same shtick. And it's just, it's not better or worse. It's just there's, the guy's doing the shtick in the way that I like the wind to be blowing. So therefore he's good. And the guy's doing this shtick in the way I don't like the wind to be blowing. So therefore it's bad. It's all kind of the same thing. It's all really stupid. It is making you stupider as an audience. It is making the coverage of the sport stupider. Like we could have an honest conversation about this where sometimes the SEC is better at things. Sometimes the SEC is not better at things. You're allowed to think both of those things at the same time about different things. And that's okay. But that's a level of nuance that isn't, is sort of like well beyond what modern college football media is able to hold in its head at one time. Fortunately, Tony, this is only a sports problem in modern media. It doesn't go any further than.
Well, and there are also play-by-play guys who have a shtick, like Joe Tessitore, who gets very animated and probably
Toyota Tony with a great point.
Probably
the world famous Toyota Tony.
Well, and that's another one, Gus Johnson. And I'm just looking through Awful Announcing they do an annual ranking, and it's user driven in terms of like the top 25 broadcast teams, college football broadcast teams. Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt were the ninth highest ranked team. And Joe Tessitore, Jesse Palmer were 8, but you get down to number 4, I think, and it's Brad Nessler and Gary Danielson. Like, it's familiar.
Mhm.
And yes, a couple of years ago, certainly Gary Danielson would have not been ranked high, certainly among Big Ten fans, but was probably always ranked high because, there are plenty of SEC fans and everybody else as well who just, he's telling it like I believe it. Like I'm looking at the whiteboard right now, and he's got Alabama ranked, it should be ranked 3rd instead of 13th right now. I believe that whiteboard. And so I think, yes, he's at the top of my board. And of course, the number 1 team is Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit. I think some of that also has to do with you get the best games, and so now you are automatically ranked near the top. Of course, also rice is the most popular food in the world, so that is also something to keep in mind. But if you had who's your favorite analyst? Like, who do you like? Do you even have one? Because a lot of times, this is such background noise for me. Because on Saturdays, if I'm home and we're actually home, I'm also doing some work like you're doing, photos and stuff like that. So a lot of it's background. Like, I don't know that I necessarily have a favorite, but I like Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit because the games are good. Like, that's another thing. Like, and they usually have big games. Now, they don't have Big Ten games necessarily anymore, but just give me a good game and I could probably get through any of the play-by-play and the color guys.
Yeah, I don't know that I have this is the guy who is clearly my favorite and the best at what he does. It's all fine. It's all, I think Kirk Herbstreit probably at some point was closer to the top of the list for me, but he's just doing too much stuff right now. And you can't, if you, if you're a parent who has, works a full-time job or two and, you're also running around with the kids and stuff, like, that I could probably do a better job on this one thing if this was the only thing I'm doing, but it's not. And so, he does the Thursday night NFL games, and then he does college game day, and then he hops on a plane and flies across the country. And then he does there are only so many hours in the day. You can only prep so much. You are not, if you're doing a Thursday night NFL game, you're not spending Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday grinding film on the teams you're watching on Saturday night. And, at some point you do have to sleep. You do have to, you probably have to take a day off here and there. It just, you can't, if you're trying to do 6 things at once, you're not going to do any of them particularly well. And I think he's kind of in that spot right now where he's trying to do too much. They're just, and I don't have a problem with Gus Johnson or Joel Klatt. I don't have a problem with Gary Danielson or Brad Nessler. I don't have a problem with who works with Noah Eagle on the NBC night game. I forget who the analyst is on that game, but they're fine. And the ESPN and ABC guys are fine. They're not terrible. And the NBC broadcast is a little, what's the word I'm searching for? It's a little parochial, Tony. But it's fine. There's not a bad broadcast. And a lot of times what I'm judging a broadcast on is like camera angles. Do you have a good replay angles? Do you have all that kind of stuff? I care about that a lot more than like exactly how insightful the color guy is. It's just basically don't do like the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball broadcast where it's just like you're talking about anything other than the game. Like if the Mets are on Sunday Night Baseball, I will never watch that broadcast because it drives me insane. So, don't get in the way of the broadcast and you're probably fine. It's fine. But I don't think there is a clear cut, blow me away, number 1, fantastic A+ superstar college football playoff announcing duo right now.
No, I do enjoy Sean McDonough. I will always enjoy Sean McDonough. I think Dave Pasch is pretty good, but give me the games. That's all I need, and then we'll go from there. Tom, I think we've done it. We've made it through 3 questions there, and we've got some more, and we will answer those. But thank you guys for sending those. We always appreciate that. Anytime you want us to answer something, and it's a question that we can spend some time on, we are willing to do it. You can send that to Tom on Twitter at TomOr4 or to me at Tony Gerdeman. Of course, Tom's phone number, if you want, it is 513. No, just DM me and I'll get that to you and get that information to you. And of course, you can find us everywhere else, especially at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up on this video. We would appreciate it. 5-star rating and review on all of your podcast platforms of choice. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.